That was an emotional moment. So still with me, criminal defense attorney Sharon Lyko and former federal prosecutor David Katz. Let's discuss the dog tag. Sharon, thanks for joining us. Let's start with you. How important is this dog tag to the prosecution's case?
I don't really know. To me, if somebody leaves their dog tags behind, I would envision him maybe being over to the Phillips home, helping them with some project, and his dog tags were getting in the way, so he took them off and then put them on a shelf and forgot about them. But I can't imagine that a murderer is going to leave their dog tags behind. That's just very odd. It doesn't make any sense.
It is. David, what are your thoughts? I mean, it's not just like they were on the floor or really near the crime scene, on a shelf in the back of the home. It does tie into the crime scene, but really, how probative is this dog tag?
Well, the defendant said in a statement when he was interviewed soon after this happened, and then the cops didn't move on the case for quite a while. Those were the years that the son spent lobbying to get the case moving. But right after or soon after it happened, the defendant said that he had very little contact with the Phillips, that there was something about them that rubbed him the wrong way. So he only had one contact. So I don't think that he was over at their house leaving his dog tag on that occasion. So presumably, since that's going to have to be his defense or may come into his defense, they're going to argue that he didn't just drop it because supposedly the ex-wife who was going through the divorce with the defendant had told Phillips something about the child abuse. So that's what he supposedly, they were going to try to bring him in to say that he knew something about it from the divorced wife. But then, of course, the defense is that he didn't really know anything about it, so he wasn't a crucial witness, so that really wasn't the motive. But the dog tag is terrible if he left it there, because it would have presumably been during the struggle. Having said that, he supposedly shot this guy with a gun. So how much struggle was it going to be? He came there, he shot him, and then he threw him down the staircase. Now, maybe he lost the dog tag during that, but this is also a theory he has, Shanley, that it was planted. So if you were going to plant something to make someone look bad months later, you would somehow get their dog tag. You would claim you found the dog tag at the house. You would claim that you found the casings at the house. And of course, you would have planted the gun, which shot the casings. You would plant that gun over at the defendant's house, and then you'd have a perfect frame up. Who really had a motive to frame him that much? His ex-wife? Did she have access to those things? Was Phillips and the aunt part of it? Very hard to believe. Again, who else murdered these three people if it wasn't this defendant, which juries aren't supposed to think, but you know that's what they think.
Oh, they definitely do. So that's the dog tag. Let's move on to another piece of evidence, the much talked about shell casing that was found. We mentioned this a little bit earlier. This was months after the murders. Calvin Phillips' sister, Diana Phillips, once again found this key piece of evidence at her brother's home. And this is surveillance video of the day she says she found that shell casing on the front porch. Now, her brother was found shot in that home's basement. So last week, the judge ruled that that shell casing could be used as evidence, but the fact that Diana Phillips failed a polygraph test about it would not be mentioned at the trial. The defense tried to get that in. That was unsuccessful. So let's take a listen to what the defense said in their opening statement about this shell casing.
So let's talk about the shell casing. The one piece of physical evidence that appears to connect what happened with Kim. I don't think that they spelled out exactly the time frame that we were talking about between the death of these three people and the recovery of this shell casing. It's 5 months. 5 months goes by where that house is unoccupied. 5 months goes by where anyone can go into that back porch. And there are people who want Kit to be convicted. And they want him to be convicted because they think that he's the one. We're going to put some evidence on from this witness stand as well. We don't have to. Judge told you we don't have to. We're going to. And you know what some of that evidence is going to show? not the shell casing, right? Because the shell casing is the smoke and mirrors. What matters are the actual bullets, the projectiles that struck these poor people. And those don't match the gun.
Okay, so this really fascinates me because we know based on opening statements that the defendant owned a .45 caliber weapon that shot this shell casing, but David Katz, the projectiles found in the victims' bodies don't match that weapon, that same .45 caliber weapon found in the home. What is the jury going to make of this?
Well, that makes it even harder. That's even more reasonable doubt. That if you were going to write the script for the prosecution side, you would want the bullets to match the gun that's in the defendant's house. If they don't, that strongest piece of evidence is kind of falling apart. And maybe they'll even have a defense expert who can testify more on that. By the way, if I can make one sartorial note, I can't make any for women, but for male criminal defense attorneys, I've had a lot of success as a criminal defense attorney, gotten acquittals and hung juries. I dressed the exact same way that I dressed as a federal prosecutor. I don't know why every time I see this defense attorney, he has on either a dark green or a dark blue shirt. I think he should wear a white shirt. That's my only trial tip. Otherwise, I think he's terrific.
That's a great tip. Real quick, Sharon, I want to ask you though, this shell casing still does tie another piece that ties the defendant to the scene, right? That's strong for the prosecution.
It's circumstantial at best. I mean, it purports to tie him to the crime scene, but if it doesn't match the projectile, I don't think it's going to matter much. There was evidence that the Phillips did have practice shooting range at their house. I'm not sure how they had that set up, but it sounded like there were several people in and out that came over that were able to practice their shooting skills.
Yes, and
so my guess would be that it belonged to somebody like that. But why wasn't it found when the police initially did the investigation? Supposedly they took floorboards with them and they combed every square inch. But yet this wasn't there at that time. It appears 5 months later, and his sister finds it.
Right.
That's suspect.
That's going to be the defense's answer. You're right. We're going to keep talking about this. And we want to hear, though, from you guys watching at home. Do you think the defense is doing